Good evening and welcome. I'm Frances Fisher, chairwoman of the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, a 2-acre tropical sanctuary located in burgeoning West Palm Beach, Florida. It includes an historic home on the National Register of Historic Places, one of the few original artist studios preserved in this country, and 9 monumental sculptures that transcend the imagination, all created as a legacy for our enjoyment by visionary artist Ann Weaver Norton. As we celebrate the 4th annual Sculpture in Motion and Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens' mission to enrich lives with nature, art, and history, we're delighted to have you join this special program, From the Racetrack to the Opera, Marques that Did It All. We've shifted our gears to adapt in 2020 and appreciate you joining us live from 2 locations: the Classic Stable in Palm Beach, built in 1922, and the Audrain Museum in Newport, Rhode Island, built in 1908, both celebrating a great love and respect for the past. Tonight, we're toasting exhibitors, host committee members, and sponsors of Sculpture in Motion. This year, as part of Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens' continued partnerships and programming, we're humbled and proud that Sculpture in Motion will honor Gold Star families and local veterans. Our hearts are overflowing with gratitude as we recognize the sacrifices made by these heroes and their families to protect the United States and defend our freedom. Joining tomorrow's exhibition of some of the rarest automobiles in the world and the Grand Tour Parade of Cars, a public viewing opportunity along Flagler Drive and the island of Palm Beach, we're also honored to have Project 425 military vehicles on display as a tangible educational opportunity to experience historic equipment used in warfare. Let me thank our Sculpture in Motion chairmen for their extraordinary vision and leadership: Bob Bishop, Audrey and Martin Gruss, Samantha and Brendan Carroll, and Lin Ching Yang and Cameron Lickle. It is your dedication and that of our generous and enthusiastic host committee that makes Sculpture in Motion possible, especially during a time when we can all benefit from an exciting outdoor cultural experience. In fact, some of our younger host committee members are joining us here this evening, and we thank you for helping to establish Sculpture in Motion as the largest annual fundraiser for Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens. Our presenting sponsor for the 2021 season of Culture Deep Refreshing and Preservation is Sentient Jet. We thank President and CEO Andrew Collins, who's joining us momentarily, as well as Kirsten Lamott, Senior Vice President of Partnerships and Business Development, for continuing to embrace our mission and our passion for Sculpture in Motion. We're also incredibly grateful to our supporting sponsors for Sculpture in Motion: Key Private Bank, Schutz and Bowen, Palm Beach Modern and Contemporary, and Palm Beach Illustrated. On behalf of our honorary chairman and guest curator, John Barnes, founder of Cavallino Classic and a true visionary for Sculpture in Motion, Grand Marshal Donald Osborne, CEO of the Audrain Museum and world-renowned car historian, author, and opera singer, and my husband Jeff, an avid vintage car collector, we thank you for joining our ride. Let's start our engines with a question or two. What does culture mean to you? Can an automobile be culture? The answer is certainly yes. What comes to mind when you think of a car? Is it freedom, style, power, or passion? Automobiles are rolling sculpture that can reflect an astonishing form of inventiveness and fantastic artistry. Much like Ann Norton influenced our South Florida environment with a forward-thinking design of rare gardens and pushed the envelope of the modernist movement with her monumental sculptures. An automobile designer has always had to live in the future. History and automobiles are an inseparable duo because behind the development of any car, there are many personal stories and events that intermingle entire generations. Indeed, they're like bookmarks in chapters of our own existence. Cars can remind us of our youth, maybe our favorite movie star, or perhaps they offered the setting for our first romance. Necessity was the mother of invention when automobiles were first designed. As the automobile evolved, road vehicles and racing cars, the period when drivers and racetracks, mythological heroes, and temples of collective imagination entered into legend. Tonight, we look forward to cruising with you through an adventure of how the horseless carriage became integrated as a sculptural whole and the fascinating stories behind the people that created, commissioned, and defined them as culture. At the center of the international stage of automobile collecting, I'm pleased to welcome a dear friend to me and the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, our Grand Marshal for Sculpture in Motion, Donald Osborne.
Thank you so much, Frances. It's terrific to be with you once again, even though, of course, I'm not actually with you. Last year, I had a wonderful time being down there in Palm Beach and meeting all of the people involved in putting it on and the people who are guests in the Sculpture Garden at the event. And I was absolutely bowled over with not only Ann Norton Sculptures, her studio, the cars, the people, the weather, everything was absolutely perfect. I'm very sorry not to have been able to join you this year, but I'm so happy that we were able to adapt and make this connection happen. And you mentioned that I'm an opera singer, and I would like to offer up a small song both to you, Frances, and also a song with sort of a double meaning, because the song I'm going to sing is by Tommaso Giordani, and it's an old Italian aria called Caro mio ben, and the words are Caro mio ben, credimi almen, senza di te languisce il cor. And it means, my dear beloved, without you my heart languishes. And it then goes on to say, please stop being so cruel, because without you all I do is sigh. And that's what I feel because I'm not there with you in West Palm Beach tonight. And also because we haven't gotten to do some of the things that we love to do with cars and with our friends. So here's a song for all of us of longing, but of great hope as well. Caro mio ben. Caro mio ben, credimi almen, senza di te languisce il cor. Caro mio ben, credimi almen, senza di te languisce il cor. Il tuo fedel sospiro ognor, testa crudel, tanto rigor, testa crudel, tanto rigor, tanto rigor. Caro mio ben, credimi almen, senza di te languisce il cor. Caro mio ben, credimi almen, senza di te Thank you very, very, very much. And I mentioned the fact that I miss being there, but there's also another friend of mine, and I know a friend of yours, who also would like to send a very special greeting for all who are watching tonight. I think you'll recognize him from a show that we appear on
Hi
together.
everybody, Jay Leno here, wishing you good luck with the next Sculpture in Motion show. I'm standing in front of the 1907 Renault. This is a Vanderbilt Cup car. In fact, the person recording this is almost as old as this car himself, and that's Donald Osborne, who you know very well. So anyway, I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I hope to make it sometime. So good luck with the show.
Thanks, Jay. And he was there with the 1907 Renault that's a part of the Audrain collection here in Newport, Rhode Island. And of course, I'd like to invite everyone who is watching this tonight to do what Francis and Jeff have done and come and visit this museum when you're next in Newport. We're a wonderful attraction, and our collection runs from 1899 to 2021, all forms of cars and motorcycles that truly tell the story of sculpture in motion, of history, and of people. And we'd love to welcome you here to the museum. If you can't make it up to Newport, be sure to watch our YouTube channel where we post 2 new videos a week of cars from the collection and tell the stories about why these cars are interesting and why we care about them. So that's something I know that is very much shared with the entire Sculpture in Motion event, because it's all about the forms of the cars and the people and the stories behind the cars. And Jeff and I will be talking about that a little later. The next thing I'd like to do is, of course, events like this would not be possible without sponsors. And as Francis mentioned earlier, the presenting sponsor is Sentient Jet, and we'd like to introduce Andrew Collins, the president of Sentient Jet.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Collins. I'm the president and chief executive officer of Sentient Jet. Tonight, it's our honor to continue our partnership as the presenting sponsor of the Ann Norton Sculpture Garden, as well as join you for the 4th annual Sculpture in Motion. Normally, I'd be with you in your wonderful gardens, but tonight I just want to say what a fantastic opportunity that's been presented here. And I want to commend your board of directors, your staff, and your supporters for all the work to support such an event tonight to celebrate education and culture in your community with your special exhibit as well as the grand tour parade of cars. We take pride, like you, in celebrating the Gold Star families of Palm Beach County, as well as the local veterans that make up the very fabric and history of our great country. So with that, it's our honor to toast you, and I wish you much success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And now we are going to begin our talk about the cars, and Jeff and I are going to begin. First, I'm going to explain a little bit about the exhibition that's here in the museum as Francis introduces, from the racetrack to the opera. We have here in the Audrain, we present 4 exhibitions a year. We're just about to change over from this one to our next one, Small Wonders. This exhibition, which opened in August, highlights pairs of cars from manufacturers that are race cars and luxury or touring cars, showing the range of innovation and engineering excellence and design excellence that one manufacturer can achieve. And among the pairs in the show are a Jaguar D-Type race car. The Jaguar D-Type, of course, was legendary for having won Le Mans 3 years in a row, 1957, 56, 1955, 56, and 57. And everyone knows Jaguar as a builder of great sports cars. But what a lot of people don't know is that this car, this 1953 Jaguar Mark 7 sedan, was actually the car for which the great XK engine was created. This was Jaguar's first post-war new car. When it came out in 1952, the Mark 7 was powered by the great double overhead cam inline 6-cylinder engine that actually survived its basic architecture through until the 2000s. It's an amazing long-lived engine and very flexible and remarkable. But most people, of course, love Jaguars for their style. And I certainly love Jaguar for its style. And if you look at the design of this car, you'll see a lot of what you see in the XK120. William Lyons, who founded Jaguar, was not a designer or a stylist, but he had a great eye, and he directed his designers to create the shapes he wanted to see. And the great Jaguar motto at this point was called Grace, Pace, Space. And that's what these cars are designed to do, to travel quickly, handle well, and offer great comfort. Also, one of the things I know, and Jeff will be talking about a little later, is one of the spectacular cars in his and Francis's collection. William Lyons loved French custom coachwork of the 1930s. And one of the highlights of French custom coachwork in the 1930s are the famous Talbot Lago teardrop coupe by the coach builders Figoni and Falaschi of Paris. Now, they're Italians, but they lived in Paris. We'll talk about that a little later. This car and the XK120 were very much inspired by those cars. You can see here in the roof line, the way the roof curves down in the back, much like some of those teardrop coupes, the way the fenders sweep from a very high peak above the wheel down towards the rear wheel and hop back up, which gives a very, very, very strong sense of power. And of course, many people have made the illusion with a Jaguar and feline power. You can really see that in looking at this car. It looks as if it's coiled and ready to jump and leap. And it's one of the great masterpieces of design by any standard. And it's also one of those great designs that defies scale. If you saw a photograph of this car, you couldn't tell whether it's a very small car or a very big car. Now I'm standing next to it, so you can see it's not a small car. But it is a car that shows its lines and its purpose off absolutely perfectly. And we also spoke about people, because we love cars, we love them as objects, we love them as sculpture, as Francis mentioned before, as kinetic sculpture as well. They are as satisfying, or perhaps more satisfying, when parked as when they're driving down the road and you can see the light passing across the form and you can hear them and smell them. This particular car on display here at the Audrain happens to be in my collection. And I'm very proud of that because I am the second owner of this 1953 Jaguar. It was given to Dean Edmonds Jr. by his father to celebrate the birth of Dean Edmonds Jr.'s first child. And he kept the car from new until the time of his death. I purchased the car at auction this year from the estate of the family. And Dean Edmonds loved Jaguars. He's an engineer. He loved Jaguars, he loved Bugattis, a thing that is very near and dear to the hearts of Francis and Jeffrey, I know. And this is a car that he wanted to be comfortable but also perform. So in 1955, he had the engine uprated to the XK120M specification, which is the specification of the C-type racing car. So it has larger carburetors, a hotter camshaft. It is a car designed to really put the pace in grace, pace, and space. And he held this car as a daily driver and loved it and enjoyed it all of his life. He was a great adventurer as well. He was a pilot, a private pilot, who actually got his certification to fly a B-17 at 90 years old. So he was a remarkable man, and I feel the presence of him every time I'm near this car. And to be able to share that kind of history is, I think, what really connects us with art, whether it be cars, standing in Ann Norton's studio. This is what connects us with art and living art. So, Jeff, I think that you've got something very special to show us next.
Thanks, Donald. That really was a lot of fun to hear about that Jag. And you referenced the teardrop design, and you referenced French coach building. Let's take a look at the real deal. This is a 1930, no offense, Donald, but this is a real Figoni and Falaschi bodied 1939 Delahaye 135 MS Special Torpedo Sport Roadster. And we're going to try to walk down and take a look at the design of this car a little bit, looking at everything that Donald was referencing, looking at the fenders, looking at the sweep of the fender as it comes down to the running board and all the way to the back. If this isn't really a teardrop shape, there isn't one. So this car, interestingly enough, to talk a little bit more about French coach building, back in the day, just like, well, you can't even really do it today. You can't really even go to too many custom suit makers and buy a suit. But in those days, you would order your car from Delahaye, in this case, or from Talbot Lago, and you would designate less than a handful of French coach builders, most in Paris. You could sit down with them, and in this case, Mr. Jantet, in the middle of 1938, sat down with Fagoni and Falaschi and said, I want a sport roadster. I want something fast. I want something different. I want the lightest possible car. So there's no, for example, there's no windows in this car. There are side curtains that you button in if you need them. There is a top, but it's minimal. There's no back seat. It's essentially all aluminum. This car is built on a competition chassis, and this car is designated as a 135 MS. Interestingly enough, you've got a beautiful car, you've got an elegant car. Underneath this skin is a race car. As a matter of fact, when I did the history and the research on this car, we uncovered a few things. One, all the original drawings from Fagoni and Falaschi on tissue paper, in pencil, and some in ink, where you could see the evolution of the design of the car and what it looks like today. We were looking for the history of the ownership of the car. Mysteriously, there's no designation. We can't find where the car was during World War II. The reason is interesting. The reason is that pre-war, the Nazis and Hitler wanted to dominate world racing. He funded Mercedes-Benz and Auto Union to build the world's best Grand Prix cars, and they began to win races all over Europe. Well, in 1938, a guy by the name of René Dreyfus beat them in a Delahaye in the French Grand Prix. Well, guess what? He was a Jewish guy. That wasn't really well liked by Adolf Hitler. When they finally occupied France, they sought out to destroy as many Delahayes as they could. This car was hidden, like many others, during the war, and then ultimately was sold and it became part of our collection, and we're real pleased to have that. So that's our story. Donald?
And Jeff, that car is indeed an amazingly beautiful car. And what you say about coach building is also quite interesting, of course, because that was the way cars were built from the invention of the car up until basically the post-war period. And coach building really died out in every country in the world except for Italy. Coach builders in the United States had long been absorbed into major companies, and we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. In the UK, they were basically reduced to building bodies for Rolls-Royce and Bentley, and even they started to be concentrated in what eventually became Mulliner Park Ward. But in Italy, coach builders still thrived in the post-war period because they built everything from Alfa Romeos to Fiat. And one of the greatest coach builders of the post-war period is, and actually pre-war period as well, is Carrozzeria Touring Coachworks. And Touring Coachworks of Milan built this car. This is a 1961 Oscar 1600 GT Coupe. And it's one of two in this style, only two built like this. And this car was the 1961 Turin show car. Now, Oscar is also a very interesting company because Oscar was the company of the Maserati brothers. Now, the Maserati brothers were tremendous race engineers and great builders of race cars, very successful race cars, but they were lousy businessmen. And they could never really get the business side of the business going to sell cars to other people so they could make money to fund the racing they wanted to do. So as a consequence, they had to sell their company in 1937 to the Orsi family. The Maserati brothers were proud citizens of Bologna, but the Orsi lived in Modena. So the Orsi bought Maserati, moved it to Modena, and established the company there with the Maserati brothers working for them. Now, they had a 10-year contract, so fortunately for the Maserati brothers, not fortunately for the rest of the world, but World War II intervened, so by the time their 10 years were up, they didn't have to actually work for the Orsi that long. So in 1947, as soon as they could leave their contract, they did. They went back to Bologna, and they started their own company. Now, of course, they couldn't use the word Maserati because that was now owned by the Orsi. So instead, they started OSCA, Officine Specializzate Costruzioni Automobili, or a custom shop to build special cars. I think the Italians are great at the acronyms, and OSCA certainly means a great deal. They built very lightweight, extremely successful sports racing cars. Again, in our pair here in the exhibition, we also have, along with this very elegant touring coupe, we have a very bare bones Vignale bodied car, which actually is a 1952 OSCA, which won its class at the 24 Hour of Le Mans in 1953. But just as they had in the 1930s, the Maserati brothers did discover, of course, that they had to do something to make money. So they began to think about building a car they could sell to gentlemen drivers and to gentlemen who wanted to drive a sporting car on the road. So the 1600 GT was born out of a project that they entered into with Fiat to design a twin cam 4-cylinder engine of 1.5 liters that Fiat could put in their top of the line sports car. And they would also get, obviously, the income from those engines that Fiat was building on license from them. Plus, they could use a 1.6 liter version of that in their own sports coupe. Most of the sports coupes that OSCA built in the 1600s were bodied by Carrozzeria Zagato, and they were lightweight cars designed for racing, but they weren't very successful race cars. And unfortunately, the true market for the cars, the gentleman sportsman, was not really explored. And as a consequence, OSCA was once again in receivership, and by 1965 had been purchased by MV Augusta simply for their production capacity, and they ceased to exist. But what a swan song. This car is one of the most elegant sports cars you could possibly imagine. This is Italy of the late 1950s, the early 1960s. Il boom economico, la dolce vita. This car has all of that style. And as some of you know, I'm very big into style. If you were at the event last year, you saw that I had my book, Stile Transatlantico, Transatlantic Style, with me. And I love the details and the simple elegance of this period of design in Italian coachwork. You can see here that the body is unadorned. There's not lots of chrome decorations, but it's extremely sculptural. You see how the top of the fender here just curves in like this to the nose, where the line almost disappears. It comes back on the fender, almost disappears at the door, and then reappears for the same detail at the rear. You have another wonderful small detail, a small crease down the middle of the trunk. Now, it may not seem much, but a flat panel reverberates. And so you can either brace it from underneath or provide some shape for it. So they use a structural necessity to give a little elegant design feature. And the most special thing about this car, this rear window. It is this wonderful concave shape, which is the shape of the sail of a Malayan fishing vessel. It is absolutely remarkable. This particular car, which is on loan to the Audrain Museum from the collection Lo Presto of Milan, Italy, has been repainted in the original color that it appeared in that 1961 Turin show. But the interior has been left completely original. And it's one of the things that I really like about a lot of Italian collectors and Italian restorers is that they have a non-intervention policy. Anything that doesn't have to be touched isn't touched. So looking at those wonderful gauges, this wonderful brick red leather, the pleating, it is such an amazingly elegant interior. This is exactly the car that the Maserati brothers needed to build to get to that target audience that could provide much needed funds for their operation. And unfortunately, it was a case of too little, too late. One of the other things I really love about this period of Italian design is how airy the cars are. Big windows, a tall, flat roof. So when you're in the car, you've got great vision out, and it really makes you connected with your environment, which is something that you really want in a GT car. So I know, Jeff, you've got another car from this period that you'd like to show us now.
Yes, I think people will be able to see some similarities. 1968 Lancia Fulvia. Look at the simplicity of this design. Starting from the back, a really, really unique back end of this car. absolutely gorgeous, but simple in its elegance. You can see how things changed from the French coach building days of the 30s as the Italians were building these cars. These GT cars, light, fast, big greenhouse. This is the glass that Donald was referring to in the Oscar. Complete visibility, really designed with function in mind, designed to go fast, but to be comfortable, to be able to go to the market or go on a rally. As a matter of fact, I've been on 2 or 3 different rallies, 1,000-mile road rallies with this car. This car is a rally car. It only has a 1.3-liter engine in it in the front with front-wheel drive. This car handles incredibly. As a matter of fact, when I ran one of the rallies near the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, there's a route called the Tail of the Dragon. 11 miles, 315 curves in 11 miles. I ran down the mountain in this car, parked the car at the end, went into the souvenir shop, got a cup of coffee, came back out in the parking lot, and found 20 people surrounding this car, the Ferrari drivers, the Porsche drivers, and they were all just shaking their heads, wondering, what is it? Because really very few were sold in this country. And this car was then, by Lancia, the displacement was increased from 1.3 liters to 1.6. And amongst the many road rallies and rallies they won in Europe, famously won the 1972 Monte Carlo rally in a Lancia Fulvia. Donald, I met you on one of these rallies. I know you love Lancia. You might not want to tell the world, but I think it's your favorite marque.
Well, Jeff, saying it's my favorite is tough because, you never want to pick a favorite because then all the other cars that you love get jealous and start to do evil things like drip oil in your garage and things. But when you were telling the story about stopping at the end of the Tail of the Dragon and having all the other drivers get out and watch, I thought you were going to say, well, it's because they couldn't believe how fast you were through all those curves. Because on a rally, when I met you, well, I didn't meet you at this rally, on a rally that we did together, you were driving your very powerful and fantastic Aurelia coupe, and I was driving my 1.2-liter Fulvia, and people could not believe how I could keep up in that Fulvia because it's all about momentum. You do not use the brake pedal at all. You use the accelerator and the gearbox, and those cars just sing and fly.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about a car that can really go fast. Are we looking at this Lusso? This is sex on wheels, right? There's no other way to say it. 1964 250 GT Berlinetta Lusso. Absolutely fantastic car in all respects. It's fast, it handles, it's obviously beautiful. As a matter of fact, most commentators that know vintage Ferraris say that the Lusso far and away is the prettiest coupe ever designed and sold by Ferrari. These were designed by Pininfarina in the day. You can look at this car, look at the camtail on the back end, look at the greenhouse. There's absolutely no rear pillar. And I can tell you from driving this car in rallies, again, visibility fantastic, very great car, a V12 motor in front. This car, it's unofficially known in Ferrari circle as being Enzo Ferrari's driver for a couple of months before they sold the car. So if I showed you the interior, you would see, as Donald pointed out on the Oscar, never touched, never restored on the inside. That's because, I guess, Enzo Ferrari's famous butt used to sit there. Donald?
Well, and the interior of that car is also a great prize because I love the dashboard layout. They could have easily put a very conventional dashboard in that car because, heck, who would care? It's not a race car. But they went and they put a really race-oriented dashboard in the Lusso. Lusso is Italian for luxury. And it's a car that, as you said, it just does it all. And speaking of cars and sex, the last car that we're going to talk about here at the Audrain is a very sexy car indeed. This is a 1927 Isotta Fraschini 8AS Roadster with a body by Fleetwood. And this is a car that is powerful, elegant. Isotta Fraschini made their reputation building aircraft engines in World War II. They built the engines that powered the great Caproni bombers, the world's first heavy bombers in World War I. And they had a tremendous reputation for being very strong and lightweight engines. And they built these super luxury cars, which were the rivals of all of the best marques in the world. Mercedes, Porsche, Hispano-Suiza, Duesenberg, Rolls-Royce, Bentley. And they were incredibly popular in the US. Their largest market was the United States, where New Yorkers and Hollywood types loved the Isotta Fraschini. Most people, if they know the name Isotta Fraschini, they're not car people, know it from the famous movie Sunset Boulevard, where Gloria Swanson quite famously says to Joe Gillis, "I've got a car in the garage. It's an Isotta Fraschini, and I paid $10,000 for it. Not one of these cheap things made of tin and chromium steel." This Isotta Fraschini, this magnificent car, was ordered and built for Rudolph Valentino. Now, of course, the great Latin lover was somebody who loved great style and had great style. And he had owned a number of other Isotta Fraschinis, some town cars, but he decided he wanted to have a sporting car to go better with his personality and his films and his characters that he played. So he ordered this car from Fleetwood. And unfortunately, of course, he died quite young, and he died before this car was completed. So he never actually got to own this car, which is quite sad. But nonetheless, this car stands as a statement not only to the kind of style and presence that Valentino had, but to the talents of American coach builders. Fleetwood is an American coach builder that was based in Pennsylvania. And in fact, by the time this car was built in 1926-27, Fleetwood had already been purchased by Fisher Body, which was by then mostly owned by General Motors, and in a few years would only be building bodies for General Motors products, mostly top-end Cadillac. But this car is an amazing thing because although it's American-bodied for a film star living in Hollywood, it just screams Italian style. This looks like a 1920s Riva speedboat. The way the chrome trim, the nickel trim comes across the hood, down the cowl, down the sides, and around the back is like a bow wave. And the way the fenders flow into these very deep mud guards and running boards, and the wonderful mahogany on the running board, it just screams wonderful sports racing boat. This is a car that's so amazingly beautiful and amazingly present, a spectacular restoration, which has won lots of concours prizes, and in fact was the winner of the inaugural Best of Show at our Audrain Newport Concours and Motor Week last year, and was recently acquired for the Audrain collection. So it's joining now a collection of now 4 Isotta Fraschinis that we have in the collection. And it's a spectacular car and a great icon of design. It feels Italian. It expresses the wonderful Italian nature of Isotta Fraschini, but by an American coach builder. Truly international style coming together. Now we're going to have a short conversation with our curator of Sculpture in Motion, John Barnes. John.
Donald, thank you. Yes, I just want to introduce John Barnes.
Please introduce John, yes.
The famous John Barnes, the creator of the Cavallino Classic that's held here every January at the Breakers Hotel and at Mar-a-Lago, and is going to be held this year. He's going to tell you more about that. And of course, the publisher and creator of Cavallino magazine. And we are thrilled at what John's done this year, like every year, in curating the cars for tomorrow at the Garden. John?
Thank you very much, Jeffrey and Francis. The game of all these shows, including the Cavallino Classic, but also the Sculpture in Motion, and also the Audrain Concours, which started last year, is just to highlight the beauty of the automobile. And these shows actually started back in the 1920s in Paris, when all the great car manufacturers in the spring would bring out their best cars with the latest body styles through the Bois de Boulogne. They would go very slow because in the cars and walking next to the cars were ladies with the latest fashions from the best fashion houses. So it really began as a walk of elegance, it became a show of elegance, which became a concours of elegance, and that continues to this day. The whole idea is just to present all these beautiful cars in a beautiful setting. Now, Donald, I guess we have some questions for you.
I hope I have some answers, Sean.
I'm sure your answers will be short, like everything you do on video. You're fantastic.
Now, of all the great Marques, we have the Citroëns, which are a French car, and they were highlighted at Pebble Beach several years ago, and they were highlighted on the Tour d'Elegance, and that was the inspiration for the tour, which starts this year with the Sculpture in Motion. And we have 3 of those cars here, and we'd like you to talk about them, please.
Well, that's a picture that was just up of the Paris Auto Show when the DS was introduced in 1955. And I have what I call my time capsule moment, where if there were such a thing as a time capsule, I would love to go back to certain events in history. And one of them is the 1955 Paris show, because I cannot imagine what it must have been like walking in off the street from all of these upright, very square, gray and dark red cars to see this spaceship sitting in the middle of that circle in the Citroën stand. And of course, Citroën had long been an avant-garde car manufacturer with the Traction Avant. They introduced in the 1930s the first successful production front-wheel drive car. And with the DS, they just took off in a totally different direction, pun intended. Designed by Flaminio Bertoni, an Italian who had started as a sculptor before he went to work in the automobile industry. And he actually designed the Traction as well. And his design for the DS, which also has a wonderful double meaning in French, the letters D and S, also pronounced DS, which is goddess in French. And that's one of the things that this car is, a goddess. It is absolutely astonishing in its form. And combined with the very advanced Citroën hydropneumatic suspension, it was just an absolute wonder and remains a wonder today, so many years after that introduction. And one of the things which is also quite interesting, we were talking about coachwork, and in Jeffrey and Francis's collection are 2 coach-built examples of the Citroën, which is rather remarkable because, I mean, for me, the Flaminio Bertoni's sedan design, the Berline, is so perfect. How can you actually bring that to another level? And Henri Chaperon was the one that really did most of the special-bodied Citroëns, as we see here with this wonderful décapotable. And this is the Le Mans, I believe. And then there is also the coupe there? No.
We have the Chaperon Cabriolet,
okay,
Donald.
The Cabriolet d'usine, the factory convertible, which of course was custom built by Chaperon, and a further custom Cabriolet, the Le Mans. To my mind, they are amazing cars. They're incredibly special. My preference is for the sedan because it's just so remarkable. And of course, one of the things that makes the myth of the Citroën DS so wild is also the fact that its dynamic driving capabilities were such that it is credited with helping to save the life of Charles de Gaulle when he was the Prime Minister of France. An assassination attempt was attempted as he was driving in his Citroën down the street in Paris, and the would-be assassins shot the motorcycles that were following him as an escort and shut off the tires of the DS, but the suspension was so incredibly capable that his driver, after a short swerve, continue ahead at almost 70 miles per hour and take de Gaulle out of danger. So it was a great advertising point. If you're ever going to be shot at on a road, you want to make it in a DS. Well, I don't think that's actually what they used for advertising, but they could have. They did.
Hey, Donald, we have a final question for you. You
Okay.
were at Sculpture in Motion last year, which we all appreciate, and you're here with us again virtually. And everyone would like to keep this connection going between Newport and Palm Beach because of the great classic historic homes and also the great historic cars. Now, we understand you're starting a show called Mansions and Motor Cars. Do you have something to show us?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at this video. All right, Jay, you ready for another great day of amazing houses and astonishing cars?
Oh yeah, let's give it a shot. Come on.
Here we are at Miramar.
Right.
This is an amazing house designed by Horace Trumbauer, who also designed the elms here in Newport, for George Widener of Philadelphia. And George Widener and his son Harry and his wife were on the Titanic in April 1912. When people think of many Newport mansions, they think of marble and acres of columns. But this place, Hope Dean, is not like that at all.
And you know, every time you hit the throttle, in your head you hear that dun-dun, dun-dun,
Exactly.
dun-dun.
Let's check the radar to see where Auric Goldfinger is right now.
I contend that so much of that value is the bond factor, isn't it? Well, how amazing is this? The car I'm driving right now, 1907 Renault, French racing car, and it's back home again. Tell them why it's home again, Donald.
Jay, we're driving down Bellevue Avenue in Newport, Rhode Island, where Willie K. Vanderbilt lived, and the one who ordered these cars new from Renault in 1907 for himself and his friends to go racing. And so we're bringing this car back to the house he moved into as a teenager in 1892. And so this will be an amazing homecoming for this astonishing car. Mansions and Motor Cars, which will have its premiere on the Audrain YouTube channel on November 27th. And we're really looking forward to expanding this. We've got 3 seasons planned so far with great houses and amazing stories of houses and cars here in Newport, Rhode Island. But this is very exportable, and there's a great, great, great history of the connection between the great families of Newport and Palm Beach and the amazing houses and spectacular architecture. So don't be surprised if we come to Palm Beach to shoot some Mansions and Motor Cars Palm Beach edition.
Well, John, Jeff, and Donald especially, we're truly grateful for your time, expertise, and your incredibly moving, beautifully performed operatic serenade, and your leadership as our Grand Marshal of Sculpture in Motion again this year. It's been a privilege and a thrill to have you with us tonight, and we look forward to the opportunity to welcome you back to Palm Beach and the gardens. And before we enjoy a toast to tomorrow's exhibition and parade, I'm delighted to introduce the remarkable leader behind the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, Managing Director, Margaret Horgan.
I'm honored to join you in tonight's special celebration. Thank you to Chairman Jeff and Francis for sharing the classic stable, Honorary Chairman John Barnes, and Grand Marshal Donald Osborne for opening the Audrain Museum in Newport this evening. We're especially grateful to our presenting sponsor, Sentient Jet, host committee exhibitors, and supporting sponsors. If you'd like to learn more about the Ann Norton Sculpture Gardens, stay tuned for a heartwarming video highlighting the incredible programs and events serving our community from last season. Please visit our website for details on the fantastic exhibition and grand tour parade of cars honoring Gold Star families and veterans tomorrow. We thank you for joining us, and let's have a toast. Francis?
Margaret, enormous thanks to you and the ANSG team, to our host committee, sponsors, and exhibitors for tomorrow. Let's raise our glasses. Cheers.
Cheers.
To Sculpture in Motion.
Cheers.
Right
Chin
on.
chin.
Cheers.
Okay, Donald, I want to see you drinking.
I am. Thank you very much.
Awesome, there you go.
Absolutely delicious.
Thank you, guys.